This should be relatively simple at this point. It's going to follow the same pattern that we've already been doing with our other behaviors. So we're going to be adding leash pressure, giving our command, the dog starts complying, we release pressure, they finish the behavior, we mark and reward. The only major difference with the down is that I actually prefer to use my foot to apply the leash pressure. And this saves me from having to bend over and over again, but it also saves me from having any extra body language that I'm going to have to fade away later on. Now bear in mind I say that, but for some dogs we're going to use a little bit of body language to help them out in the early repetitions. But again, I want to be able to fade that body language as early as possible. So if I have to use my hand to apply downward leash pressure, then I have to bend over every single time. If I use my foot, like we're going to show in a moment, I can stay upright and simply place my foot over the leash, which allows me to maintain a very normal posture and normal body language, and just creates one less thing that I have to worry about fading down the line. As I said, this basic process is going to be relatively simple. What we're going to do is we're going to start out with our dogs next to us, just like they would be if they were in heel position. And again, I generally like to have the dog sitting, because that way their butt is already on the ground and they're not moving around too much. Once they're in that position, if I have two hands on the leash, which is what I recommend for this, we're actually going to let go of the leash with our left hand, or the active hand, whichever is close to the dog, and let the leash hang basically all the way down to the floor. Once it's in that position, we're going to step over the leash with our left foot, or whichever foot is closest to the dog. So if your dog is on your right, then it's going to be your right foot. I like to try and get my foot such that the leash is in the arch of my shoe. And I do that because on most shoes or sneakers, the arch has a little bit of a groove, and that's going to hold the leash in place so it doesn't slide out and pop out from the toe of your shoe. And it's going to give you a little bit more control. Once I'm here, I'm able to use the leash and my foot basically like a pulley. If I pull upward on the leash and slide my foot closer to the dog's collar, it's going to create downward pressure. Now the key here is finding how much pressure to apply to the leash. We don't want to go overboard here. If we start really forcing our dogs down, it can cause a panic, and it could really cause our dogs to protest and start stressing out a little bit. So we just want to have enough leash pressure that our dogs are thinking about it a little bit. Additionally, I want to be prepared to be a little bit flexible. So I don't want to step fully down on the leash, because that's going to make the pressure a little bit too rigid. For some reason, when we're doing downward leash pressure, some dogs are a little bit uncomfortable with this, and they often move around a little bit, or they try and rear backwards a little bit. And in my experience, if we hold the pressure too firmly or too rigidly throughout that, it can cause the dogs to panic a little bit, almost like they feel trapped or they're being forced to the ground. So if I start lowering the leash pressure down, and maybe my dog lowers his head a little bit, I want to be prepared that if he suddenly pushes back, I want to let the leash move back with him a little. I'm not going to remove the pressure from the leash, but the pressure can move with the dog, so he doesn't feel that he's being rigidly trapped in that position. So having my heel on the ground but my toe up, and making sure that I'm not stepping flat down on the leash, really ensures that I have that flexibility. So again, we're going to apply enough pressure that we can tell our dogs are thinking about it a little bit. And once we have that amount of pressure on the leash, then you're going to give your verbal command. Depending on the amount of foundation and your dog's responsiveness to the command prior to this step of training, you may find that when you give the verbal command, the dog goes down right away. We often find with the downs that we do have to help our dogs out the first couple repetitions. And this often involves bending down and pointing to the ground, or using a hand gesture similar to the lure, or actually having food in our hand and luring the dog. As the dog moves down, the leash should naturally go loose. However, if your heel is up, you can make that release more active by also lowering your anchor hand, which is holding the remainder of the leash. So by lowering that hand suddenly, it is going to create an active release on the dog's neck. So once they're down, we're going to mark and reward. We want to make sure that we deliver the reward down low, basically right below the dog's face, between their paws. I try to avoid reaching down with a treat from above and doing that too slowly, because it causes the dog to want to reach up, and that reaching up sometimes causes them to pop up out of the down position. So we're going to apply pressure, give the command, and once the dog is down, we're going to pretty quickly get food down underneath their head, so they're reaching down to take the food rather than up to take the food. In the early stages, we're not going to require too long of a stay. We're just going to get them down, reward them, and then release them before they make a mistake. And then as we progress forward, we're going to add a little bit more duration to this.